Well, good Monday morning. Hope you had a good weekend. Today I want to talk very quickly about discipleship, but not just discipleship. I'd like to actually take it to the third and fourth generation. If you're like me, discipleship is important to you, but sometimes it's hard, much less having to take it to the third and fourth generation. But this is really important that we understand because Scripture is clear that our discipleship needs to not just be one generation deep. If we look at Scripture, we actually see that God was very clear through Paul, through Jesus, and through others, this idea of third to fourth generation discipleship. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, Paul actually tells Timothy that he, Paul, is discipling Timothy so that he can tell other people who will tell other people for generations. In John chapter 17, when Jesus prays the prayer in the garden, he actually prays 4 generations deep. He prays from himself to the disciples, to future believers, that's us, to the world. 4 generations. Now, this is a big deal because if we're not going generationally, God's kingdom actually stops. We see this through the life of Joshua. Now, I don't know about you, but I think Joshua is pretty stinking amazing. He's one of those men in the Bible that you can look at and honestly, all you see is strength. He was a strong family leader. He was a strong leader in the nation. He never portrayed anything but strength. He was a beautiful servant and yet a warrior at the same time. There was just nothing about Joshua throughout Scripture that really is yucky until he dies. See, Scripture tells us that Joshua was very intentional about being strong himself and about pouring into one generation of leaders. But if you look at the book of Judges, after those leaders passed away, Scripture says that Israel turned away from God. So there was a breakdown in the generations. Joshua was excellent at teaching his leaders, but the one thing that didn't happen was his leaders didn't teach more leaders. If you are in a process of discipling another woman, if you are in the process of walking beside them intentionally, and you're sitting face to face intentionally with her maybe every week over a cup of coffee, or you do it monthly, and you're being intentional about her walk with Christ, I encourage you to not just keep it face to face. At some point, I encourage you to take her shoulders and turn them outward and show her who God has in front of her to pour into as well. Because when we pour into somebody who pours into somebody who pours into somebody, then kingdom fruit begins to be multiplied in a way that you never anticipated, which is why Jesus said, go and make disciples. So this week, don't just pour into somebody, pour through them.